We start with Meta's major investment in Alberta. The company that owns Facebook and Instagram, amongst other things, plans to spend more than $13 billion on its first AI data center in Canada. The campus will take up more than 700 hectares. That is twice the size of New York's Central Park. Now, Sturgeon County has been tapped to house the massive facility, and it is expected to consume 1 gigawatt of electricity. For perspective, that is equivalent to 70% of the energy used by the entire city of Edmonton. Now, the project is expected to create more than 3,000 jobs during construction and support 300 jobs during operation. Meta will also spend $60 million to support local infrastructure for the center. For more on this project, I'm joined by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Premier, good to see you again. Thank you for taking some time today.
Hi, David.
There is a lot of pushback in the United States against these big data centers, particularly the hyperscale ones, because of noise, energy, water. What makes you so comfortable with the idea of Meta setting up a facility so large?
Well, we've been watching that with great interest as we've gone through this 2-year process with Meta and worked with them very closely to make sure that they found the right site and that they were addressing those issues. So what I would say would be different about this one is that they've located on land that is zoned industrial and has been for 40 years. It was supposed to be the site of 12 refineries, but that never developed. So that's one thing. There's community buy-in that this is an industrial zone. They also are going to bring their own power. That's part of the reason why the site is so big, is that they'll be building the power to manage to fuel or to electrify the increasing growth in the data center and not use the power grid. So that's the other part, is that it will keep our prices low, but also help to subsidize some of the transmission costs. And then thirdly, they're using what they call a closed loop water system, so that they draw the water once and then they're able to use it for cooling and air cooling. And so I think that when we've been watching some of the other concerns, we think they've mitigated the vast majority of them with this siting that they chose here.
But when you look at the needs, I take your point, they're going to provide their own energy. I mean, the physical space this takes up is the equivalent of 2 Central Parks in New York. And the energy demand is equivalent to about 71% of what the entire city of Edmonton uses. So all of that resource, all of that land, and then however they deal with the water situation for cooling, for 300 full-time jobs when it's up and running. That is a lot for a small nominal amount of employment.
Well, I would look at it a little bit differently, because we look at the revenues that they're generating for government, because when they develop this plant out, they'll be using more natural gas, so we'll get royalties from that. They'll be subsidizing the power grid on the transmission charges, reducing everyone's power bills by about 6% on the transmission side. And then all of the additional revenues it will generate, it's a minimum of $250 million a year. There's not that many single employers or single entities that can deliver that amount of dollars, and that goes into making sure our taxes stay low. It goes into making sure we have additional dollars to pay for growth in healthcare, growth in spending for education. And so we think that that's a pretty good value proposition.
It wasn't that long ago, though. I'm sure you might have seen that Premier Wab Kinew rejected the idea of a specific data center in Manitoba because of the energy demands it was putting on the hydro system there, and basically said it was a big threat to the environment. Do you share those concerns? Because this is one of the big challenges with these hyperscalers, is that it's an emission jump, and then there's the water challenges as well. It's the sort of thing that a lot of people are uncomfortable with on the environmental side.
Well, I can see why the discussion might be a bit different in Manitoba, because they are mostly hydro, and hydro is expensive to build, and there's a long run time on it. And so it may well be that they can't add these to their grids very quickly without impacting other power users. But I can tell you that this is part of the reason why we've been advocating against the net zero electricity regs, is that we knew that the only way to fuel this kind of development was through the kind of project that you can bring on quickly and inexpensively, and that's natural gas. And so one of the starting points that we had with this industry is, if you want to come to Alberta, you've got to bring your own power. And if you can, build more power than you need, so that you can sell us your extra, so that we can keep prices low for consumers. So I think the conversations in the two provinces might be a bit different, because our energy mix is a bit different.
Right. So on that energy mix, so you say they're going to build their own power, bring their own power. I think Pembina, the pipeline company, not the Climate Institute, they said that the Green Lake Power facility that they need for this, probably second half of 2030 is when that will be up and running. But Meta wants this data center going before that. How do you meet such a voracious power need if the battery comes on after the data center?
Well, Kineticor is the other partner on the power plant construction, and they had a great success with their Cascades project. So they built a 900 megawatt power plant with Indigenous ownership, incidentally. So the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation helped to underwrite some of that Indigenous ownership. And there were a number of other projects that came on stream that allow us to have a surplus in our power grid right now of about 2,700 megawatts. We hived out about 1,200 megawatts, saying that's the amount that we feel that we could use for data centers. And so that's what Meta ended up aggregating. So that will get them started. But then as they develop, they'll get their power online, and then those electrons will be available back to the grid. And so we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to at least begin the project. But as they scale, the key is that they're going to have to build their own power. They've got an initial 932 megawatts, and then the intention would be to double it if it works out for them.
Right, because there's some potential this could go up to 1.8 gigawatts, which would be more than the city of Edmonton, and it just speaks to the appetite these facilities are going to have on the energy system. So when you say you have 1,200 megawatts set aside, does that mean right now out of your current surplus, or is that for your future planning? Because I wonder how many of these things you hope to get. Does that mean just one more, or will you take as many as you can get, provided they can find their own power supply?
Well, we did have to limit it to 1,200 megawatts. We have to make sure that we have our own buffer, because we have seen that there are surges, whether it's a air conditioning surge in the summer or whether it's a surge in the dead of winter. We have to make sure that we have enough buffers so that people aren't left without power. And that's number one. And so I would say that this is the first of this kind of project, but the others will depend on how quickly they can build their own power, because we certainly don't want to have anybody feeling like their power bills are going to go up. That was one of the things that we learned from watching some of the pushback in other communities. So nice to have this first one. Nice for us to also be a leader in artificial intelligence through our Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. We know that the real issue is going to be, how do you use AI in the future for the betterment of humanity? And that is the part that we're working hard to demonstrate, that the use case for AI is going to be a net positive. Because I know some people are concerned about that, but we as a government are adopting AI in our own applications. We're adopting it in healthcare so that we can then use AI Scribe so that doctors have an easier time charting. We can get faster diagnosis. You can use it for drug discovery. We're feeling like the use cases is where we're really going to get the benefit of it.
Yeah, look, there's massive potential here, but as you know, massive potential for problems and social disruption and economic disruption and dislocation, and that's all got to be managed as this inevitable transition happens. I want to, if I can, Premier, the time we have left, talk about the pipeline, because I know, I mean, you didn't get the full-on private sector proponent that you were hoping for. It's a private-public partnership, but it's only 10% private right now. I talked to Dennis McConaughey about this last week, or earlier this week, and not a proponent of more oil sands development, but skeptical that the oil companies are going to increase production to fill this new pipeline, because even with the reduced carbon price you've agreed to with the Prime Minister, but with the pathways obligation, it's still not going to be economical. I mean, how confident are you can get the barrels of oil you need and the production you need to fill this pipeline you're going to build to the BC coast?
Well, it is the case that Alberta is a higher cost basin than anywhere in the world. I mean, when you look at Saudi Arabia, they can extract more oil at a cost of $2 a barrel. Ours is about $37 a barrel. So our base is much higher. But if cost was the only factor, no one would develop oil anywhere except Saudi Arabia. So there's other things that are a factor. And one of the things is that once we've established where our resource is really, it doesn't have the same depletion that we see in other fields. And so that's one of it. And so the costs are upfront. And what we've done in the past is we've helped to defray the costs of developing new greenfield by having a slightly lower royalty rate or a dramatically lower royalty rate until costs are recovered. And then it comes up to the levels that we have once those costs have been paid off. We've also worked with the federal government in the past to have accelerated capital cost allowance that allows these companies to make the investment, write it off early so that they can get into profitability faster. So I think that there is some work that needs to be done on that to make sure that we get back to the kind of investment environment that we had maybe 10 years ago. But I'm committed to working with the federal government to do that. And I think if we can get that right, we'll see that the companies will increase production to fill the pipeline capacity that's available. That's what they've always done. historically is that everybody thinks, oh, no one's going to fill this pipeline. And now look what's happened. Not only is Trans Mountain fully subscribed, but they're talking about expanding at 300,000 barrels. And so I suspect we'll see the same story.
But when you look at where things are projected to go right now, there is, with the TMX expansion and other pipeline projects to the United States, I mean, there's capacity for what is projected to come on stream. And the political argument has kind of made it sound like if we just build this pipeline to the Pacific, it will unlock all of this development. And it doesn't seem as clean cut as that based on sort of the lack of urgent sort of proclamations from the oil sands that, yeah, we are going to do this, we are going to fill this. Because you've de-risked this substantially with the two levels of government stepping up essentially to take it on. So why do you think we haven't seen that? Is it possible they just might not make the move?
Well, let's give it a little bit of time. I mean, for one thing, having Trans Mountain as a partner is important because they've gone through this route before. So that will actually streamline our building and also allow us to identify problems in advance. The fact that we already have Pembina Pipelines willing to take a 10% stake to start, I think that that's also a positive indication that we're going to be able to have that private sector discipline. But I can tell you, I've been meeting with a number of international delegations during Stampede in Calgary, including the ASEAN nations, and every single one of them tell me two things. We're food insecure and we're energy insecure. And if you could make sure that you get that pipeline built, we'll take as much of it as you can send us as quickly as possible. And so I think that that's going to be what ultimately dictates the speed of this is, do our customers want it? And with the continued disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, their view is, you know what, if Strait of Hormuz could be closed once and then closed again, it can keep on being closed. And they just don't they don't want to have that kind of uncertainty. There are some countries in the world that start rationing and start seeing outages if they don't have a secure supply of energy. And we want to make sure that we're able to provide that to our trading partners. So I think there's an enormous opportunity, which is why I believe that Canada is willing to work with Alberta to make it happen in a timely way.
But Premier, just as a final point, I mean, a 10% private sector stake in this pipeline that there's been a political battle for a decade. That is not an enthusiastic private sector endorsement, right? Like, didn't you expect it to be higher? It certainly, all of our conversations led me to believe, you might believe it would be 100% private sector.
Well, I thought it was going to be 0% at this point, if you want the truth. I mean, we've just put in the proposals, so people have just had a chance to see what the route looks like. We also have a process we have to go through with Indigenous consultation, which will take place between now and October 1st. Then it will get conditional approval. Then we go through it, the broader approval process. And we're all working towards the September 2027 approval where we can actually start digging dirt. So I'll be interested to see how this process goes. We're testing it out as well. I know that there's been a number of projects identified on the major projects list, but I think we're going to go into it with good faith, believing that the federal government really wants to streamline the process. And then we'll see what that looks like when we get to September of 2027. But make no mistake, this is a really good investment for Albertans. We think our share on the equity side, because most of these pipelines do end up getting financed because of debt, because the tolls end up paying it. So we think if it's $10 billion in equity that has to be put on the table and our share is $2.5 billion, to unlock $1 trillion worth of value, we think it's a pretty good value proposition. And then we'll have long-term tolls that we get from the pipeline, but then we'll also have all of the additional money that comes in from the development of the resource. So I think it's worth taking that chance and working with Canada on it.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Thanks, David.